Good morning. So I am live. I'm here in my studio and we are going to start looking at lighting for churches. I did ask an AI chatbot thing what I should teach today, and one of its suggestions was how to light for worship. And I thought I would cover it because I find lighting interesting. I kind of enjoy it. And I definitely think it makes a big difference. I think lighting can be something that can really transform what you do. However, I need to say from the very beginning, I'm not a lighting engineer. I have no training or background in lighting. And for me, lighting is, I'm entirely self-taught, and I've just kind of taken a bit of a guess at it and figured it out as I've gone along, really. So, for me, I don't have a lot of knowledge of lighting. I can understand the basics of lighting and I can get by from to a certain degree, but there's a lot more that I can learn from a lighting perspective. So what I can teach you today is going to be really a very simple level of lighting. Now for me, this is sufficient. I can achieve some fairly good results from the lighting knowledge that I have. So I'm going to share with you the lighting knowledge that I do have. However, there might well be people watching this video who know more about lighting than I do. And again, please do use the chat facility. I can see there are people finding the stream again. Please do make use of the chat. If you're there and you're watching, please chuck something in the chat and say hello, because I'd love to be able to say hello to you. And if you know anything about lighting, please jump in on the conversation, because I would love to learn what you know as well. For this one, I've got quite a few examples that I'm going to try and show you. So these are some of the projects that I've been able to work on recently, where I've been able to utilize lighting. And for me, some of these, this one in particular, so this was a guy called James that I did some filming with. So these projects were ones that I've worked on that for me, lighting made a big impact on. And I looked at these videos and I was just like, wow, I was so pleased with how these came out, because the lighting just really added something to these events. So I have had the ability to be able to work on some events where lighting has made a significant difference. And as I say, for me, it's been really useful to use the lighting knowledge that I have to be able to do some of this stuff. So I want to talk through with you some of the things that I've done, some of the stuff that's worked and some of the stuff that hasn't worked. I'm going to break down lighting into three basic categories for you. So I'm going to talk about lighting in terms of white face light. So we want to light up the people on the stage. Obviously, so much of what we do in a church context is about presenting through words, sort of presenting to the people in the room. It's obviously a very difficult one to categorize, but we're going to be talking about things like worship leaders singing, preachers talking, Bible readers reading, prayers praying, all those kind of things that we have typically in a church going on. We need to be able to see the faces of those people who are presenting, or whatever it is they're doing, whether they're singing or talking or whatever they're doing. We need to see them. We need to see their faces. And so white light is very, very important. We need to make sure we've got sufficient white light levels to be able to see both in the room, but also through camera for online stuff as well. We also want to make sure, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is white light. Second thing we're going to talk about is backlight. And backlighting people, again, I think is a really important thing, and it makes a significant difference to a video and to just seeing people in the room if they're backlit. Backlight's really important, so we'll talk about that. And I'm going to talk about colour lights, interest lights, effects, haze, that kind of stuff as well, and how we can use that sort of stuff. So three things that we're going to talk about: white light, backlight, and then colours and effects, how we use those and how we get the most out of those. So let me show you a few more examples of some of this stuff at work. So first of all, talking about white light, and This little video clip is more an example of where white light hasn't quite worked. So you can see here we've got white light, but for both of these two people, there's actually a husband and wife worship leader team here. They're both lit from one side. So this guy here is the right-hand side of his face, the lady here, left-hand side of her face. The lighting that we used in this context was... cameras again. The lighting that we used in that context was quite wide to the sides of the stage, and so the light was actually shining in across to the sides of their face. And what it meant was, if they stood to one side of the stage, they had a very strong light coming into one side of the face, and the other guy to the other side of the stage had a strong light coming in on the other side of the face. Now, there's often what would be called the 45-degree rule when it comes to lighting. And what you want to avoid, there's a few things you want to avoid with white light. You don't want to shine it straight into people's eyes, but equally you don't want to shine it too high onto the top of their head, because that's going to then create shadows under their eyes and under their chin and things. And so we talk about raising a light by 45 degrees to get it out of eye line, but not so high that you start creating shadows. So 45 degrees up is quite a good angle to be able to shine down onto people. But also, don't want to go out to the side more than 45 degrees as well. If you start going out very wide, that's when you start to get this effect where light's just hitting the side of their faces and not lighting them down the middle. And I've got another example here as well. Just find the right video. Yeah, this one. So this video, you will see, this is the same venue, same situation, but as the guy steps towards the front of the stage, his face just disappears completely. So the lighting here was just right to the sides of his face, and so much so that actually when you step to the very front edge of the stage, there was no light at all. It had just completely gone. So the light you can see is lighting the lady stood behind him, but not really lighting this guy at all. And again, that was just because the lighting here was too far wide. It was almost shooting behind him, shooting into the back. So this was an event. It wasn't a Sunday morning thing. It's not a regular church building. This was a conference that we did. But that lighting was just far too wide, and for future we would definitely want to bring that in so it's more in line with the front of the stage, so we're lighting people from the front rather than lighting from the side. So make sure you get that angle right, get the light in the right position, don't blind people, don't light from too high. Remember the 45-degree rule and get some good white light to cover the front of the stage and to light from the correct direction. So white light is important, but you need to make sure you get the angles right. Now, I'm going to move on to talking about backlight. Backlight, again, I think this is a really valuable lighting source. You will get a significant impact from lighting from behind. And in fact, if I even cut back to the studio camera here for a minute, you will see there is a light there. That light is specifically set up to light me from the back here, and you will see it down my neckline and around my shoulder. You will see there's a little highlighted section around me that just helps me to stand out from the background behind me. And again, if we cut over to this video again, you can see the same effect here happening. So this guy here is, he was a preacher, and this was an Easter event that I did. This is my own church. This was the Easter event that we did. And you can see here the backlight there, creating that kind of outline around this guy. It just really helps to make him pop out. I mean, particularly here, we were filming against a black drape background, so the white outline effect around the black drape really makes a high contrast, very kind of poppy look. It really helps to sort of make people stand out. So it makes it very clear where the centre of attention is here. The big benefit with this was we filmed this in the round. So this event, we do this every year for our Easter services. We do it in the round, so everything's happening in the middle, which means there's a lot going on in the background, lots of people in the background, lots of movement and things in the background, which can easily become distracting. So by separating him from the background and really pulling him out, making him the centre of attention, we can really draw focus to a certain part of the stage or whatever it is that we're doing. So if we really need to draw focus into one particular space, we can do that using backlight. Just really sort of isolate somebody, pull them out, make them very prominent and very obvious in that setup. Now, backlight is something. Sorry, I just need another drink. Developing a bit of a squeak, that bowl. Backlight is something that you might want to use more or less of depending on the context. So in this example, as I say, this was a very prominent, very strong backlight, and it makes it for a very contrasty, very poppy look. So it really makes them stand out, but it can be quite a strong look. And you might say, actually, we don't want to make it quite that strong. You might want to have something a little bit more subtle than that, and that's absolutely fine. You can adjust your light level to make that more or less obvious, so you can have a slightly more subtle look than that. But I've got another example here where effectively really that went too far in the opposite direction. Yep, so this video. Back to this conference that we did earlier on, and you will see here in this video that the backlight here, the blue backlight here, is very, very strong, and as I've already said, we had some issues with the white light anyway. And what I tended to find here was that the backlight actually was really overpowering the front white light, and so we had a very strong and coloured backlight. So the backlights here are in blue, and so we've got this really kind of I wasn't a particularly big fan of this lighting look. I felt like the backlight here was too much, the white light was too little, and with it being blue as well, it was a very odd look. It threw everything into this fairly kind of cold, sickly looking thing, and for me it just didn't really work very well, this particular lighting design. Now, just to be fair, I need to make sure we say that this is there isn't actually an operator running these lights. These were just kind of set static, basically. I think had somebody been there adjusting these, I think it would have looked different. We would have deliberately pulled those down and made some changes. But the way it was just left that those backlights were particularly hot, particularly bright, and the front light wasn't as bright. So as you can see, we ended up with this very strong blue halo effect around the back of people, and then the white light kind of not really cutting it to compensate for that in the front. So do be careful with backlight. It's good to have it, and it can make a big difference, but make sure you're not using more backlight than you are front light, and make sure that the colours that you use in the backlight are appropriate to the event itself. And it's not a problem to have coloured backlight. So again, if I cut over to this one, this was a video that I used where we did have some coloured backlight, and in this context it worked really, really well. This was it's obviously a worship video, and there's loads of energy here, loads of movement, loads of drama. It's kind of just lots going on, lots happening, and that kind of coloured backlight in here really helped to just add another dynamic to this. But as you can see as we go through the video, it's less overpowering than it was at that conference, and it just kind of worked in this context much better than it did in the conference. If you've got somebody who's just speaking, a preacher or something like that, then I would probably not want it to be quite as dramatic as it was in those other clips. So face light, make sure you've got some good white light on the face. Backlight, really important, but just make sure it's right for the context in which you're doing. Oh, great, thank you. Thanks for that comment. Very glad it's helping you. So finally, the coloured lights and effects stuff. So in fact, we can stick with this video just for a minute. So coloured light here, as I say, was really important on this video. We made some really good use of colour. Now this again was a static lighting setup. Nobody's operating these lights. You can see the colours don't change, the lights don't change at all. There's lots of colour, so greens and blues and purples and reds and all sorts going on, but they're all just static coloured lights. But there's no reason why. These days it's fairly easy. I'm just going to try and find the right lighting, not that one. Yeah, so with this one, there's a few different clips that are going to come on here. You'll see in a second there's some other options as well. So, but this one is all about just demonstrating how we've used coloured lights in the background, and not necessarily, so here you can see it's moving, but it's not being operated. It's just set to a kind of repeating pattern. So the lights just come on and off. There's some movement to those lights, but nobody's operating these. These are just completely just programmed, set and left. And having that movement in lights, again, just adds another dynamic to it. This, again, was the Easter service that we did. So I wanted some movement, I wanted some interest, I wanted some energy there, but I wanted it to be subtle. I didn't want anything to be too dramatic. So the lights are just moving very slowly. So it's a fairly subtle, small, low-level movement. And again, same with this one. It's a very similar kind of vibe here with this one. So just some subtle fades, some subtle movement to this lighting. None of this was operated. This was all just a set static pattern that just repeated itself. And that, I think, works really well. And depending on your church context, you might be in a situation where you can have a lighting engineer who can run all the lights for you. But most of the time, I think most churches probably don't have that. And most of the time, most churches will be kind of set and forget type lighting. So you just want to have a pattern that you can turn on and it can just run, and you don't need to worry about it. So adding colour is a great dynamic to add into a video or to a live context, whatever it might be. Adding colour is really useful, but just think about how you can use that in a way that will add and not take away. So we wouldn't want disco, flashing lights, loads of stuff going on if it's just going to be a set and forget. There might be some songs where that works, but generally speaking, you want to have something that is appropriate to what's going on. So generally, I would go more towards the subtle end of that scale than to the higher end of that scale. Now, the other thing, just before we move on here, there's some haze you can see in this one. Haze is another really important thing to talk about. Because haze really picks out on the lighting. This particular clip here, we didn't use haze for. I don't know if I've got a clip that's just of the haze, have I? Yeah, here we go. So this one, this is the haze. Haze, what haze is doing is it's giving something for the lights to reflect off. So you can see there, the lights, there's a set of lights along the floor. Those lights are... that haze is just giving something for that light to reflect off, and so what you actually get is more light output effectively for your light. So lights need something to reflect off in order for them to be able to see them. So either they're going to reflect off the people on the stage or perhaps the stage surface itself. But if you put haze in that room, then all of the air around those lights also becomes a reflective surface effectively. You get something for the light to bounce off. So you see more of that light effect. So you actually, again, you kind of amplify your lighting. You get more bang for your buck. So again, haze can be a really good option if you want to get some interesting lighting effects. But again, make sure it's appropriate to the context of the situation. Again, it worked really well in this environment. It was a really nice way of being able to utilise that lighting and to make it really stand out. But we also were conscious of the people in the room, so that it looks like quite a lot of effect, a lot of haze in that, but that was the haze machine set to 1% of its capacity, so really dialed it right down as low as it will go to try and make sure it wasn't too overpowering in the room, and it worked really well in this context. But again, it's all about context. Make sure it's appropriate, make sure it works in the context. Yeah, so make sure you've got some good lighting effects. Make sure you've got some good white lights. Make sure you've got right angles, 45 degrees. Think about backlight. Make sure you've got an appropriate amount of backlight. Don't have more backlight than you have front white light. And then think about other effects, colours, lighting, patterns, movement in your lighting. All that kind of stuff is really important, really helpful. But make sure it's all appropriate to the context in which you're using it. And you do all those things and you can get some really great results. As I've said, I've been privileged to be able to work in some really great projects recently where we've had some really good lighting, and it really does make a big difference to an event or to a Sunday service or to whatever it is that you're doing. So lighting is a very valuable thing.